4:45, we dig into normally topics that are off the radar, but I got to be honest with you, I don't think Brett Yormark's comments are off the radar. I think that's very much our bread and butter, but I don't know where else we're going to fit them in, so might as well, get to them in this segment because I know there are some items of interest, certainly when it comes to what he had to say. So let's start off with expansion. And the talk there, obviously, there's the Gonzaga discussions that are ongoing right now. They've been open about that. Mack Rhodes was on with us last week and acknowledged that, it's not necessarily something that's going to happen right away, but down the line, certainly. They've been open at various points of not closing the door, being open for business, although Brett Yormark did say after their acquisition of the remaining Pac-12 schools that were on their radar, that we're done for right now. We're definitely done for right now. We're going to focus on onboarding. We're going to do this and that. Well, now the Gonzaga thing's out there. I know there's still, what could happen with Oregon State or Washington State or any other number of options that are out there on the table. But he was asked, as you might have mentioned, because of all these different things about expansion today in Kansas City for Big 12 basketball media days, and he basically shot it down. Not shut it down. He shut down questions as far as realignment goes. He kind of got ahead of it and said that he wasn't going to be talking about specifics and getting real deep into the weeds on any expansion. There was that, but he did say, to quote him exactly, but I will say this, no different than last year. If an opportunity presents itself for me to strengthen this conference, I'm going to explore it. So he cut off the questions, but he did say that. So how do you
think
guys...
because he did that something's close?
I don't know. I mean, potentially, Gonzaga would be the bet that would be something, potentially soon. Nothing else right now would add up that would be anything soon, which was kind of my point a couple weeks ago. It was just, this idea of there being an imminent thing. Then Gonzaga popped up. So, that obviously was completely off the table and out of the way, It looked like, and then boom, it comes back. So that's just sort of how this works sometimes. And, learn to never say never, but he did say no different than last year. If an opportunity presents itself for me to strengthen this conference, I'm going to explore it. So that follows on the heels of Seth Davis and the reports on Gonzaga and how all that might work. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, if Gonzaga happens, that's fine. If it doesn't happen, that's fine. I'm of that nature. If it happens, I trust Brett Yormark in wanting them for a reason because of more money that comes to the schools that are in the conference that will be here next year and beyond. And if that brings in more scratch, then do it.
Yeah, if Gonzaga helps you get that basketball money when you bifurcate the deal. Bifurcate.
There was a guy that played for the Bengals.
Yeah. So when you do that, if Gonzaga helps that, if there's another basketball entity that helps that, then do it. But right now there's nothing that's going to imminent that's going to do that. And he did say that their ability to bifurcate basketball is on the next deal, not this one. So any additions to that would be kind of buying a stock low, I would say. So buying Gonzaga low right now would be that. Like, okay, 5 years, 6 years, when the media deal comes up again, we're going to split off basketball, and Gonzaga is going to help us with that. So now the risk you do run with Gonzaga, although they pour most of their athletic resources into that basketball program, as long as they have Mark Few, they're going to be fine, is that Gonzaga is not going to be as good in the Big 12 as they are in the conference they are in right now because they're going to lose more. So how does that affect them? Does that hurt their overall value?
I hear this about Mark Few. He's 60.
Yeah,
that's not. I mean, it's not like he's 75.
No, like I said, as long as they've got him, they're fine. And he's got a coaching tree that they can go and find somebody who knows exactly how he did it and do it the same way, and probably continue to be successful. They were good before him. I mean, John Stockton went to Gonzaga. I mean, so let's not pretend like this isn't a 50, 60-year basketball program. But are they really going to help, or is that just something that sounds like it should, but it may not?
Yeah, and one thing I wasn't factoring in when talking about all this again was what the ACC did, and what SMU basically set the tone for, which was, hey, we won't even take that much money, or we'll pay for ourselves at least the first few years, and that's just so foreign to me, that whole idea. But if that's how it works for Gonzaga, then okay, but that just is so beyond me that I had to remind myself, oh no, that's how it worked for SMU, and that's how it could very well work for others potentially, I suppose. But it remains to be seen. But he did not want to comment about expansion or get into talks about that other than basically saying if the right opportunity presents itself, they'll be ready. And Paul mentioned that word bifurcate. The quote from Dennis Dodd earlier today was about just that. The current Big 12 media rights deal gave the league optionality to bifurcate football and basketball in the next deal, but they still have, or it still would need to have value. So I guess, did you kind of touch on that with what you just said there?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, in other words, they have the ability to split off men's basketball for a new TV deal. That's not breaking
They feel
news.
they do, yeah.
And that might have been as much with Bob Bowlesby as it was with anything that Brett Yormark, based on the extension that did come down a year ago about right now.
Yes, he also was asked about when we could see.
No, go, Bob. You want me to read Bob Thompson?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was looking for clarity on what exactly that meant.
Bob Thompson, translation to what Dennis Dodd was reporting about Brett Yormark, the renewal rights in the current deal won't require the Big 12 to put a combined basketball package together for ESPN Fox as part of the renewal package. Instead, the Big 12 would have the right to put forth separate football and basketball deals should they choose to do so.
Yeah, that is their plan. I mean, that's the thing that they've been really harping on, right, is getting a separate basketball deal. But obviously that's not soon. Again, it's something down the line they're working towards, but that will be interesting, and especially if Gonzaga joins the fold, then you would think that just sweetens the pot all that much more. With all of the new teams that will be joining the league next year. He was asked about a schedule release and when we could anticipate seeing that. And I think he said, he hoped it would be late November, December. Didn't sound like it would go really much past the first of the year. But as we know with the Big Ten, like those things can be worked on and displayed and thrown out there and then be crumpled up and thrown away a few months later. But it did sound like looking at new schedule for football next year could be late November, December. And then let's see, he talked on expansion. I mentioned the schedule release. And then there was also
number of men's basketball games that they'll play.
I was going to get to the tournament too, but the parameters for future football schedules with 16 teams, he said that they will look at geography, competitive balance, history, and rivalries. So those will be some of the key categories for a 16-team football league. As far as the Big 12 basketball side of things with 16 teams, he said they will feature 20 games in men's basketball.
Jeez.
There will be 18 games for women's basketball.
Scott Drew was on with us about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he said whatever's best for the Big 12, he wants it to happen, whether it's 20 games. My God, that's a battering ram.
Well, it's 20 games, and that means, here's the thing, it's a battering ram of having to play 15 teams once. Just
Right,
if you just played every team one time 15 games, then I think most people would be like, well, that's fine with me. You eight at home, 7 on the road, everybody's happy. But now when you throw in, there's some years where that 5 you're going to have to come back around with, So say you're UCF and you feel pretty good about your basketball team going into a year. You finally, climbed out of the cellar, and then you get that schedule, and the teams you have to play twice are Kansas State, Baylor, and Kansas, among the other two. That could happen, and that's where you're like, come on.
Yeah, nope. Yeah. So that's going to be, really interesting to see the differences in the schedules and how all that comes together and competitive balance and all the things that will play into that. But yeah, for football, he cited geography, competitive balance, history, and rivalries. And for basketball, it will be 20-game schedule for the men, 18-game schedule for the women. And so he touched on expansion, not really, but sort of let it be known like, the door's always open. Touched on schedule release for football sometime late this year, early next year. Touched on the number of games for men's and women's basketball in the future 16-team league, and also talked about the potential, again, of a split deal with football and men's basketball in the future. But he also touched on, I guess, one final note here, the future of the basketball tournament itself, and that was probably the most talked about topic, I think, because I just caught a glimpse of a Utah fan, and it might have been more than one, but at least one that, popped off and made a comment about, like, why don't they have the tournament in Vegas? And it's turned into like 300 replies with like 2 retweets, like one of those like ratios, because Brett Yormark said that they are in early discussions with Kansas City to keep the basketball tournament in KC through 2031. So that got quite a bit of response. And in some of the newbies, what about Vegas? I saw a lot of Vegas, especially from Utah fans. But then there were a lot of people making the case for Kansas City and why it works and just saying, like, hey, you haven't been there, you don't understand. I saw a couple of, I guess, probably newcomers mentioning, well, what about Dallas? Well, then it had to be explained. Dallas is not a great site for the basketball tournament. People don't show up. It's not fun. So Kansas City has just kind of been the sweet spot for them. But definitely some pushback from those who haven't experienced that yet. But what are y'all's thoughts on the KC hosting of the basketball tournament through 2031?
Smokey asked me if I would like to go to Kansas City.
No, I know you would. And you
yeah,
don't,
so-
you've been there more than I have been. What they do there, they get it.
Yeah.
And it's not just, okay, it's in the middle of a hot basketball bed because of Iowa State, Kansas, and even when Missouri was in the conference. It just, they get it. They've tried it in Dallas. They've tried it, I guess, elsewhere. I know that there was
Oklahoma
what
City.
about Las Vegas? If you look at a map and put all the pinpoints of where everybody is in the 16 teams, even starting next year, it's kind of an isolated area. Kansas City does a great job hosting the tournament, and until they don't, they deserve to keep hosting it.
Look, Vegas is a great place to host anything. They could host. They're hosting the Super Bowl this year. They'll do a great job. Vegas is the city that hosts things. They host everything. They should host everything, but you don't get to just host everything. And I think that part of it is, again, Kansas City just does such an outstanding job. And when you compare it, Craig and I had to go cover the women's basketball tournament in Dallas, and it was no offense to the game. I mean, actually, the game we covered was a really good one, but the scenario and the setting, the AAC was where they played it, and that's really the only place that they can play it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing around the AAC that makes it as social and as big an event as the Power and Light that is around what I guess is the T-Mobile Center now, and not the Sprint Center. I can't remember what it is, but whatever the arena's
I don't think Sprint exists anymore.
Yeah, so the T-Mobile Center. So whatever is around there is really cool, and it's walkable everywhere downtown. In downtown Dallas, nothing is walkable. Like, there's nothing. You're not going to park somewhere. I guess there's a Hooters down the street or whatever, but that's about the only place you can go.
How would you know that?
Well, you and I parked there when we covered the Mavericks.
You got a seat reserved there, remember?
Yeah. So, yeah, I
mean, we're also speaking of like 15 years ago too. Like, Dallas has grown up a bit around the AAC,
No,
but it's not the Power and Light district. And yeah, it's the T-Mobile Center. We should probably know that, talking about how great the venue is, because they bought up Sprint. But there's a lot of Vegas talk, and I know what you're saying, but like, they are much closer to Vegas now than they've ever been before, with all those new schools coming into play.
I know.
But
I'm not going to complain if they were to go there have a rotating.
I mean,
but you know what?
I do think there is a point in, like, hey, why not try to carve out a little niche there? But everybody's got a niche there for the most part, and you can have a niche whenever you want to.
If you do something in Vegas, and again, Phil Benzer, who watches us, that'd be great. But you have a place that's done a great job of hosting something. And why would you mess with that?
Well, I guess they're not trying to.
The Big 12 championship started out, what was it, like Kansas City or St. Louis? It went to Houston. They've been in San Antonio, and they've had some great games around there. And, of course, now you have the perfect stadium, basically, with AT&T, so it makes sense. But I know that there's like, yes, but it gives Kansas and Kansas State and Iowa State or whoever an advantage. And I get that, too. But Kansas City does a great job. If they move it, it doesn't bother me, but I'm just saying they've earned the right to keep that going. And Yormark, apparently, who's willing to look at different options, apparently agrees.
My suggestion to the Utah fans that want it in Vegas would be, you know what? Get on a plane and hop on to Kansas City, and you'll have a blast. You'll have a great time. They do it really well. There's lots of stuff to do. I know that sometimes you think of cities in the Midwest as like, well, what's there? But Kansas City's a really cool city. They're it's a great place to visit.
A lot of people in the chat room saying they would. What about every 2 or 3 years? I would not.
Yeah,
be
I mean,
against-
I don't know
Yeah.
why there's a pushback. I mean, and not at least like looking at Las Vegas for like a year and just seeing how it goes. I understand the argument is, well, they've got everything already and it blends in and it's not anything unique and special like it is in Kansas City. That's a valid argument. More people turn up in Kansas City because it is close to Iowa State and Kansas State, as opposed to when it was in Dallas and it was a ghost town or what it might be in Vegas. But we're going to pretend like all those people are not still going to Las Vegas to watch their teams play basketball.
Vegas is economical to get to, too. So
Right,
it's not
so-
You
like...
get 1,000 flights there from everywhere.
Yeah, it's not like you're saying, like, so go play it in Miami, and you're like, oh, dear.
But here's the thing, though, guys, is like it's staying through 2031. So like that's the point of it. But I don't think that like pushing back against the push, like what does Utah guy know about Kansas City? What does he care? What does Arizona fan? So like it's valid that they aren't just like, okay, sure, Kansas City through 2031, sign us up. I mean, they have every reason to be a little bit skeptical and wonder, like,
Why don't they join the conference first and experience Kansas City?
because that's not how Twitter works, guys. I mean,
Yeah.
why don't we all just get along? I don't know, because we don't. But this is, again, just a conversation on social media. So Brett Yormark, Kansas City through 2031 is what they're working on. So there you go with that. All right.